back and forth between everything. So go ahead.
Thank you,
so
Chair.
Go ahead and continue.
I'm happy to do that. I'm here in my office today just so I could have 3 screens going so that I could, do some flight control here and make sure that you have the materials that you need. Anyway, as the chair mentioned, we received hundreds upon hundreds of public comments and pieces of oral testimony. A vast majority of those were received after the board book was published. So that is, many of them came outside of the initial summary that I provided you a few weeks ago. I know the board has reviewed a lot of this testimony, and I cannot possibly hit on all the points brought up, but I'll mention a few of the themes that were present in much of the testimony. A significant portion of commenters supported the proposal, citing the potential for a safer environment for non-motorized craft and small motorboats. Some supporters cited the potential for mitigation of damage from wakes, and there were plenty that supported the proposal because of perceived benefits to fish, wildlife, and associated habitat. As always, a portion of the commenters also adamantly opposed the proposal. They did so for a variety of reasons, one of which was questions about enforcement of current rules and current education efforts. Many of those people believe that the Marine Board should continue to focus on addressing the current issues through education and enforcement of current laws and not look to make new laws. A handful of petitioners said the proposed rules are biased against motorized boaters and specifically against wake surfers. These folks allege that the Marine Board has become biased against motorized boaters and that we are blatantly prioritizing them over the interests of all water users. As you saw in the comments, there are many folks that said that the proposed rules would create more problems with congestion and create dangerous situations in areas of the river that were currently unregulated by these rules. And I'll get back to that in a little bit. There were also those that did not support the proposal because it does not go far enough, essentially, because comprehensive restrictions on all wake boats or wake style watercraft or even all motorboats is actually what's needed, and that these rules do not go anywhere near far enough to adequately address some people's concerns. And then almost a universal theme among many opponents was that the proposed rules will lead to a decline in home values along the river, whether that is because of people will not be able to use their watercraft for their intended purpose or because certain watercraft are actually damaging the value of their home. It's something that we continuously hear from both sides. As I mentioned before, a whole lot of comments were received after I wrote the initial summary. Much of this was due to email and social media blasts from boat dealers, stakeholder groups, and from Willamette Riverkeeper, urging folks to contact us with their perspective, which is great, by the way. I mean, it did lead to hundreds of additional comments that we may not have received. In that recent testimony, much of which was in that last blast that Chair Early referenced, a few other themes emerged that I want to, they're not in your current board book, but I want to make sure they're mentioned here in this meeting. One of those is impacts to small businesses. Recent testimony has highlighted negative effects on river recreation businesses if towed water sports are significantly restricted on the lower Willamette River. Another emerging concern is a potential need for more regulations around the Elk Rock Island and Milwaukee Bay Park area, in that kind of close to the middle of that Waverly to, and I'm actually going to share my screen real quick on this one. In the middle of that Waverly to the Falls stretch, several stakeholders are looking to see that area more heavily regulated, potentially with a slow no wake zone. And I'm just going to share real quickly. Let's see. Okay. You should be looking at a map with pink in it, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that area that they're referring to this is Elk Rock Island. This is what's known as Milwaukee Bay. Milwaukee Bay Park is right here. So there's concerns that this area will be problematic even if the current proposal is adopted. So I'm going to stop sharing now, but we can certainly go back to that at a different point. So I have a couple just considerations and things that I want to get out there, and then I'm going to kick it to you. Obviously, this is the difficult decision for the board, and a decision that has been in the works for over a year now, and so I understand the gravity of this. I've had plenty of conversations with law enforcement agencies, mainly Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, about these potential regulations and what they would look like. And they haven't taken a stance on the regulations in one way or another, and they have indicated that they are stretched thin, and new regulations doesn't necessarily change that. So if the proposed rules are adopted or some variation thereof, staff is poised to pursue a management implementation plan, unlike that we've really undertaken in the past. We've already had conversations with every facility operator below the falls about how we can work with them to make sure appropriate signage is up, other materials that can get into the hands of boaters. And as Randy mentioned yesterday, we're also exploring other options other than through traditional law enforcement to have folks on the water informing people, educating people about boating regulations. So, depending on what happens here, I think we would use those. I believe they're called boating safety advocates. Randy, don't get on me if that's not the correct acronym or the correct terminology, but we would use those positions to also, help the implementation of new rules for the Willamette River. I mentioned this, about the Milwaukee Bay Park thing, and something that many of the commenters said. Depending on what is passed, it may cause some potential congestion issues in some other areas, and so. The areas that may not be regulated by whatever goes forward, I think the Marine Board we will have to consider some ways to mitigate some of those. And we have some ideas, promoting other stretches, other water bodies, other stretches of water bodies for activities if they're restricted in some areas. And I think there's some room to improve on that, but I think that we have some ideas. Also, this is something that I really would like the board to engage in some conversation in. If the proposed rules are passed, specifically for the Oregon City Falls to the Waverly Marina stretch, we will likely be inundated with requests for 100-foot slow no wake buoys off of the private docks in that stretch. We saw a lot of that in the Newburgh Pool, and which has led to quite a few buoys in that stretch. And considering this area is more narrow, has more docks, we would certainly expect that as well. This is something that we've had conversations with law enforcement about, and they've kind of said, like, well, on one hand, but on the other hand. So if we permit what could potentially be hundreds of buoys, you're looking at some potential navigation hazards, as well as just a decrease in the aesthetic value of the river with just a whole lot of things in it. On the flip side, we've seen this in the Newburgh Pool, that private buoys do lead to more law compliance, and it also serves to help kind of separate the uses. And that's, at least part of the reason why we're here now looking at this regulatory framework. So regardless of what happens, with this agenda item, I'd like the board to consider whether the staff should permit private buoys, and if so, what parameters we might put around that. The board should also be aware that future requests for rulemaking on this will begin coming in immediately after any proposal is adopted. And just like we have done on the Newburgh Pool, I would encourage the board to consider some sort of implementation and evaluation time frame that then I would be able to share with stakeholders when they say, like, well, can I get this changed? And I'd at least be able to point to, anything is possible. However, and we're continuing to evaluate. However, the board has indicated that they would like to see this, evaluated over X amount of years before it's revisited. So that's just a kind of a personal request, actually. Something like that will help staff as we go forward and convey the wishes of the board. So in conclusion, staff does not believe that there's new information that has come to the board, either in public comment or from other partnering agencies, that would alter the board's course from what they decided, what you decided in October. Therefore, staff recommends that you adopt the proposal that was proposed in October and adopt the rules that are in the board book for boat operations in Multnomah and Clackamas County. And with that, I'm done with my piece. So, Chair Early, I kick it to you and the board.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. Vince, you have your hand up.
Yes, Chair Early and members of the board. When the October meeting was over, of course, my phone blew up with stakeholders that had grave concerns. Participants from the lower Willamette RAC that didn't feel like their voices were heard, that the consensus was more about education and enforcement and not added regulations. And so my advice to them is like, partner up with some of these rowing clubs, talk with some of these other stakeholders. Is there a better option out there? Is there a better plan that would promote safety? And because again, a lot of these stakeholders are, and Josh said it, are feeling targeted, they're feeling singled out. They don't feel that their voices were heard, especially in the RAC, and they felt that was a waste of their time. And back 5 years ago when I was on the advisory committee and then on the board with the Upper Willamette, it was a breath of fresh air to work with Steve Gregg of ORSPA and Matt from Active Water Sports, because you had two stakeholders with, conflicting opinions come together and work out a compromise plan that would give something to everyone. And I feel after that October meeting, that wasn't the case. And many, many stakeholders felt the same way. And I know that we put a lot of work in this, and you could have rules, but they could be not good rules. They could be bad rules. And to continue to do that in the spirit of safety, it goes everything against what the Marine Board's all about. And so talking with these stakeholders, and this is going to be, like you said, Josh, you got small business that are affected, and there is really right now, we don't have the information of how all these new rules are going to affect small business. How is it going to affect safety? Like what our law enforcement partners say. The harbor master said that these new rules are definitely worrisome, that there are some grave concerns of how this is going to affect other areas. And so again, talking with this group, I said, reach out to some of these other groups and see if you guys can come up with an alternative plan. Because as the board, we get certain information and we can only rule on what we get. And so I have a proposal from, again, lower RAC participants. I've got, hundreds of river users, homeowners that live on the river, even paddlers. We've got Andrew Hansen, who spends a lot of time, he has a social media page for paddlers, and he's on board with this new proposal. Because again, we're not always going to get what everybody wants, but I think the rules in October and these rules that we have in front of us aren't fair. I don't think it's going to be in the spirit of promotion and or safety. And so I just want to share the plan, this proposal, and I've talked to other board members about it, and we've tweaked some things on it. I just want to know if I'm able to present that.
Josh, go ahead, Vince. But Josh, you can chime in on this and maybe share a screen with us to show us maybe a little bit about helping to understand what Vince is going to be talking about. So
I will be happy to support you, Vince, with any visuals that I can get on the screen.
Okay. So again, we're trying to be as least restrictive and in the spirit of safety. We feel that a pass-through zone, and it's from what they call Toe Island, which is just past the sailing club downstream from Willamette Park. Okay.
Hang on, Vince.
What's that?
Hang on. Let's let Josh show us where that is.
Yes. I mean, okay, there we go with that. So what this new proposal would be a pass-through zone starting from Toe Island and heading south upriver to the south end of Waverly Marina. And again, that pass-through zone, no water sports or no towed water sports at any time. It's a pass-through zone, no loaded ballast. You can't go through there with loaded ballast. It's strictly to get from one area to the other. Okay, is that clear? And then, yep. Go ahead. Okay, so that's the pass-through zone, which is what some of our old rules were, the ones we did in October were kind of similar to that. It's just changed a little. But within that pass-through zone, in front of Willamette Park, and this could be, this can be adjusted, but somewhere around a quarter mile or a half mile of a 5 mile an hour zone or no wake zone. And what this is going to do as far as safety goes, for one, paddlers that are launching at Willamette Park, and I don't know if we have in the plans with the access, the waterway access, are there going to be paddling launch docks there or whatever, but regardless, anybody launching from Willamette Park will have a free run across that river and across, similar to what we have at Boone's Ferry, where we've got from bridge to bridge, where the marina is there. It's the same type of thing. It's a slow no wake. So when you're going across that river to get to the Holgate Channel, you have safety there, and it's not going to take that much time, an extra 5 minutes, out of our time. And again, that can be adjusted, but somewhere between a quarter mile to a half mile to make sure it's effective. Plus, it'll also protect some of the floating homes that are on the corner there by Oaks Park. So again, a compromise. We have a pass-through zone. We have a safety corridor. Okay. The next thing would be, and this one was interesting because I think we brought this up in past meetings of how this would look and how it would work. And and this is going to be from the Hawthorne Bridge all the way upriver. And let me look at the island, Elk Rock Island. So what this would be, this area would be, again, from the Hawthorne Bridge upriver to Elk Island. And again, times can be adjusted, but from anytime before 10 a.m., no towed water sports at all in that area. So that gives paddlers that free reign of the river and not having to compete with other towed water sports. And that's tubing, water skiing, wake surfing, wakeboarding, that kind of stuff. So again, times can be adjusted, but that gives that whole area kind of paddlers their own time frame. And again, the biggest thing is safety. And we think that's a very busy part of the river. As you get downtown, that river widens up. And so it's easier to stay away from other paddlers. Again, the whole spirit of this proposal is fairness to all who use this river. It's not targeting a group, it's giving something to everyone. But what has to happen in order for this, there has to be some adjustments. And obviously we just made rules in October, but those pass-through zones need to be opened up. So we need to go back to square one and basically rescind those rules. And then the rules that we have on the books today, to turn those down in order to see if this could work. I think it's a great approach, but added to that would be education for all. And I'm not just talking, I'm talking to everybody. And in some of my pictures, and I don't know if you can see, and again, if this is going to be really hard, but if you notice in the middle of the river here, and this is upriver, I'm not sure exactly upriver, but near Lake Oswego, you have paddlers in the middle of the river. And, I'm just saying that's not the safest point to be if you're a power boater. And the power boater wants to be in the middle of the river. They want to be away from the shore. And so education for all is like, if you see traffic, move off to the side, allow the power boats so everybody can coincide, equally. So again, this was a collaboration between quite a few stakeholders that again thought that the rules that we did in October, and I wasn't for them, was a severe overreach, and it basically targeted one user group. And in this, in that you have to ask these questions. And let me grab these real quick. So with this new proposal, now is this proposal a safer approach? And talking with Portland Fire and Rescue and even just chatting with law enforcement, less restrictions, more spread out, a safer operation for everybody. And does this line up with the Oregon State Marine Board's mission statement of access for all? Over-regulating one user group is not the answer. Does it have a more positive effect on small business? And again, we still don't know what these new rules are going to do. One, to safety. Is it just going to be quite a bit worse? And nobody has really researched small business. How are they going to be affected? And there's a lot of businesses that are involved in this. Again, is this proposal in line with the spirit of fairness and compromise? And I don't see a whole lot of compromise on the last meeting. Something for everyone. And then again, I feel, and this is input from several RAC members, that this was not what their envision was. This proposal was, but not what we came up with back in October. It was more about education, less restriction, moving people around, not forcing them to one side or the other. So I would like to know how other board members feel about this new proposal. I like it. I think it's fairness for all. I think it's not overreaching. I think it gives something to everyone, like we did on the Upper Willamette. Well, anybody else have some ideas on this, please?
Laura has her hand up. So Laura, go ahead.
First off, thank you, Vince, and friends of Vince, I guess, who came up with this idea. It is intriguing. But now I'm going to put Josh on the spot. I agree with a lot of what people are saying, that putting in rules is kind of the last resort, and education and enforcement was one of the key items we kept hearing from the stakeholder RAC. I know law enforcement, at least in the Portland metro area, is a really touchy subject with not a lot of budget, and basically they can't even find people who want to be officers. So, getting law enforcement up to what we need it to be is going to be hard. But on the education side, Josh, can you address why OSMB didn't push for a statewide towed water sports program, which was something that the board did at least briefly discuss at certain points in time? I know we have given some grants. We're going to be giving more grants through the Waterway Access Grant Program for non-motorized boater education, but again, it's something that takes time. And there was one other question kind of along those lines. So why didn't the Waterway Access Pass send some money towards law enforcement?
So to that, okay, so remember, Jackson, I'll answer that one first, because that one's fairly easy. Initially, there was a provision in the Waterway Access Bill that would send money to law enforcement. That was taken out through the legislative process. Lawmakers indicated that they did not want the Waterway Access Funds supporting law enforcement. So that was part of the initial plan brought forward by the Marine Board or the governor's office on behalf of the Marine Board, and that was stripped out. To your other question, why wasn't something pursued? That was mainly just an artifact of the legislative time cycle. So we began this rulemaking in October of 2019. That would have been when legislative concepts need to be ready to go to the governor's office for review for the 2021 cycle. I know it sounds crazy, but there's a big lag there. If some sort of statewide towed water sports education or some sort of education for non-motorized boaters or anything like that, any kind of requirement of boaters that would require a fee, that's gonna have to be a legislative concept. That's something that we can start working on right now. And if the board indicates they'd like to go in that direction, staff will start working on that soon, because by the fall of this year, we'll want to have our legislative concepts ready to go for the 2023 session. There's actually a tentative agenda item in either April or July that I had put on the board meeting agenda. That's, we need to talk about legislative concepts early. So that's forthcoming, and I encourage all the board members now to think about things that, if you would like to see the agency press for statute changes, start thinking about those now and get those ready for board meetings over the next 6 months.
So again, just to kind of follow up, clarify, to do any kind of really major education or law enforcement package, education of non-motorized and or towed wake sports, the earliest something like that could be really implemented would be boating season 2003 or 2023, because it would have to go through the 23 legislative session, not 2021's.
If it had a fee attached to it, right, Josh?
So exactly, Chair Early is correct. The fee component. So we can't charge things unilaterally. That has to go through the legislature. And it's actually wouldn't be 2023 because that session would end in the middle of 2023. So voting season 2024 would be the first time that any new legislation pushed by the Marine Board would realistically be able to take effect.
One thing I forgot, these rules would be a seasonal, starting from May 15th to September 15th. So it wouldn't be a year-round pass-through zone. Obviously, that'd just be through the busiest times in the summer months. And this group is also for education for all. I understand the legislation, didn't want that part of the waterway access. But with the increasing deaths that you're finding that, we heard of yesterday from paddlers and stuff with just, being over their head in what they're doing, I think that would be something that they need to really look at. And the popularity of the sport lends itself to these people need to be educated. And I know that Laura and those paddling groups do a good job of teaching their members, but it's like I said, it's the general public that buys it from a box store and heads out that next day. So, and then they should be required. Now, obviously, the more people involved, the cheaper it is what I've heard. So, but again, this group definitely is in favor of that, education for all. And I think Craig has his hand up.
Craig, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. We've taken a lot of testimony and watched a lot of videos that shows that we do indeed have a problem there. A lot of it is congestion, too many users, too small a space. So I hope we're not naive enough to think that we can get by without any rules. I personally feel that we're obligated to do something now that we've been presented with what we've seen in the testimony. And really, the biggest problem on the river is a lack of courtesy and respect for others. If everybody followed the boating rules of the road, then we wouldn't probably have a problem. But it's just like on the highways, we have traffic lights, stop signs, school zones, because people need to follow rules to protect the safety of others. So I think we need it here. Now, the board is not about banning any recreational boating opportunities, just the opposite. We're trying to promote it. So I take exception to people saying we're biased and we're trying to eliminate one boating activity over another. Rules are going to have to be necessary. And the approach here is going to have to be multi-pronged, in my view. We have to stress education. We have to stress law enforcement, signage. We have to do something about the liveries along the river who are allowing people to go out without any education or knowledge of the situation they're getting into. So I think we have to do something, and I think we have to do something now. Now, I'm intrigued by Vince's proposal, but we all need to see it in writing so we all understand it together and we know what we're going to be acting upon. I'm also concerned about process. How do we get this in place for this summer, which I think is necessary? So I think we need to consider that. If it takes a special board meeting, then let's have one. But let's sit down and we all understand what's being proposed together before we act upon it. But I
So,
do want to go ahead.
Oh, Director Warren wanted to chime in here.
Oh, I would certainly wait. Craig was finishing his thought, and then I
Go ahead.
I just wanted to share.
I'm pretty much done. I was trying to just keep going if I had anything else that popped in my mind. So I'll turn it over to you, Larry.
So, Chair Early, members of the board, a few things I just want to put out there for thought. One, I want to clear up what we often hear is, I think, a misperception, which is there is nothing that requires a group of paddlers to paddle on the side of the river. Certainly, we always hope that all boaters and everybody figures out a way to share the water and work together in a way that benefits most to their boat. But there's no reason why that group of paddlers can't be going down. In fact, the rules of the road and the navigation are very clear that If they're doing that, it's my obligation as a motorized boater to mind my wake and figure out how to get around them safely. And so that's one of those, we hear that a lot in testimony. Certainly as someone who runs some of the rivers in different areas, it's disconcerting when you come around a corner in a sled and there's somebody in a kayak in the middle of the area you were going to run. But the rules of the road are pretty clear on that. And so again, that's some of that education piece of teaching people how to work together on the water. And, you know, we have all different skill levels and all different types and all different reasons people get out on the water. And so I just caution that it's a message that I think we need to make sure we're clear on. The other piece, you know, there's been mentions of the rack, and I would just offer, you know, everybody always has a map that they can draw. Usually I find that somehow the map always allows for their boat where they like to go. That's how I would draw my map as well. If I was drawing maps, and that while racks and input are important, the board doesn't cede their authority and their rulemaking to the rack. The board is the rulemaking authority and the recognized authority for that. So racks are important, but nothing about a rack says I get what I want out of that. And you know, opportunity comes up. We talked, you know, a lot of talk about banning, and I think a lot of misinformation gets shared. And when I look at the staff recommendation today, I see a lot of opportunity, and I can understand why a wake surfer might not feel that way, but some of the misinformation out there is considerable about what these rules do, and understandable because there's a lot to them. But if I look at the area, say from the Falls to Waverly, paddlers, crew, sailboats, fishermen, people in their wake surf, in a tubers, skiers, all those activities are happening in that area. The pass-through zones, you know, again, boating can still happen. They just can't have a tuber or a skier or a surfer when they're going through those pass-through zones. And then all sorts of opportunity down below. I think it's the Fremont Bridge. I get some of my Portland bridges mixed up. All sorts of opportunity for wake surfers to get down there and go. So I guess I would say that I think while unfortunately our rules cause the board to have to focus on what's being restricted, and that can lead to folks thinking it's somehow a massive loss of opportunity, I would offer to the board, I think there is a lot of opportunity still left for a lot of users. In fact, some could contend that what we learned in the Newburgh pool was that some of the areas where the wake surfers were moved off, we saw other boaters be able to come back and enjoy that water. And so wanted to share those thoughts and just reiterate, I guess, from my perspective, the staff, I would stand behind the staff recommendation and encourage the board to take action today.
Thank you, Director. Colleen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Vince's proposal, but just wondering if we can see it in writing, because that would help for review. And then procedural question, if we do decide that we want to look at Vince's proposal a bit more closely, do we need to make a decision on this agenda item today, or can we table it and discuss it in perhaps a special session?
Josh, you can help me here if you want to, but I believe, or Director Warren, I believe that it's possible, of course, to delay action on this today and have a special board meeting if you wanted to consider that as an alternative. However, you know, from Josh's standpoint and from the staff standpoint, there has been a tremendous amount of work and also time spent on this. If we do consider Vince's proposal, it would also need to go out for public comment again, if that was the flavor of the board. So if I got any of that wrong, let me know.
Shirley and Josh, maybe you can come in on the process. I think, you know, that it would be a significant enough deviation from what's proposed that we definitely would have to run a public process again. And again, I would remind folks that this is the result of many years of work with the public and outreach. And so my only caution is we have a special board meeting, and I believe, you would just see 6 more maps and a lot of different opinions, and we could continue to circle on that for essentially forever. So again, I just would turn it over to Josh if he's got more to say on that piece.
Thank you, Director Warren. No, I don't have too much more. I would say that I believe that the public is starting to become a bit confused. And we've solicited public comments from them now 3 separate times on different lower Willamette issues. So I guess I'm kind of just mirroring what Director Warren just said. I would also point out that even if with an additional public comment period followed by another special board meeting, if the goal is rule implementation in 2021, that may not be feasible in that timeline, because I mean, yes, we could maybe have rules adopted by May or June, but there will be significant implementation. I mean, staff has, even though that we are unaware of the fate of the current proposal, and we already have drafts of signs and things ready to go that we're working with these municipalities for, because I see implementation of these rules as a very important thing for the Marine Board, for the Marine Board's credibility. So, and I want to make sure that we're able to do that by the time the boating season starts. All that being said, it's certainly still up to the board, and we could work on your timelines, but implementation for 2021 becomes more and more challenging the further down this road that we go, if that is a priority for the board. And we've worked with, Director Warren talked about some of the stakeholders we've worked with, and these include the governor's office, these include lawmakers, these include multiple state agencies, local municipalities. There are a lot of them looking for decisions now. Whether that's a concern of the board or not, that's certainly up to you. But that's just a sense of the background here.
Thank you. That's all helpful.
And I know that everybody is, probably mirroring the frustrations of many. I mean, you could read it in the letters, you could read it in the public comment, you could hear it in much of the testimony that came through. So, and obviously the board does not take any of this lightly. The last thing, like Craig said, we want to do is to limit any kind of a boating group. And in a perfect world, everyone would get along just fine on the water, be courteous and provide room, and recognize that everyone has their right to different types of boating activities. But we are certainly not in a perfect world. So I'm going to turn it back over to Laura. You've got your hand up, and then Vince.
I think Vince's hand was actually up before mine, so
I just wasn't sure if it ever went down. So
okay.
I just wanted to comment that we do have it in writing. It was tweaked up into even yesterday. So it's kind of they've been working on it. We got some advice from other people, and so this is the final of what we think would be the best for everyone. I get it that we've all worked our butts off on these things for years, but to have bad rules, just to do something just because there was pressure to do it, I don't think that's correct. I want to get it right, and I think, and I'll be honest, the Newburgh pool, not everybody's happy, but I think we did a pretty good job. That river's better off now than it was 5 years ago, in my opinion, for everybody involved. Everybody got something. And it took some time, and we've tweaked it a little bit. I just don't think that the rules we did in October, we didn't have this choice. Obviously, what was presented to the board, there wasn't anything really acceptable to me, and that's why I voted no. I thought it was overreaching. So, usually this board is pretty connected, and we generally kind of see eye to eye on most things, and that one was way off, in my opinion. And so when they came to me and said, hey, I'd really like to see if we can run this and see what the rest of the board thinks. I'm counting on the rest of the board to say, is this a better option? Yeah, it's a lot of time wasted possibly, but to get it right, I mean, don't we owe that to the Oregon voter? And I mean, that would use my opinion, but we do have it in writing, or that group does have it in writing. We have, diagrams, but obviously, I couldn't get it to you because it's usually easier when we're in person. I just put it on your desk right next to me, but we can't do that. So,
Laura.
There's a lot about Vince's concept that I think is intriguing, but we have a problem on the water today, and part of getting something in place for 2021 is part of my concern on this. One of the other issues is we haven't really talked about House Bill 2351 that requires the Marine Board to consider Oregon Planning Goal 15, the Willamette Greenway Planning Goal. City of Portland recently adopted their Goal 15 plan for the South Reach. Under their prior plan, they had required developers to build accesses to the river from South Waterfront and from some other places. As conditions of development, some of those developers put in racks in their garages for tenants in their apartment and condo buildings to have paddle boards, canoes, kayaks, whatever. So we have a city planning, basically planning rules, planning goals that are in place for that entire stretch. And I'm not, we've made investments that we're now saying, well, it's okay to have towed wake sports, where we've had people make investments in habitat restoration, habitat preservation, non-motorized access. We've given grants to people, and we may be giving more grants to people for our waterway access program. And we're going to say, oh, well, we will allow towed wake sports in those areas. I think once we get the law enforcement where it needs to be, once we get education where it needs to be, maybe we can go back and do something like what is proposed. But I think right now, because we don't have those components of both paddler education and towed wake sports, that was the one comment I think that really hit me, was how many people are driving towed boats and the amount of skill it actually takes to drive one well. And I know Vince has done a lot of educating of boat drivers on better, safer standards of practice for driving those boats, but we're not there yet. And so maybe sometime in the future that program could go forward.
Vince?
I think, did somebody else have their hand up before me, or is that Laura?
That's Laura, but then, so it's you and then Craig.
Okay, well, I want Craig to go ahead and talk before me, so go ahead, Craig.
Well, I agree with Vince that we want to get it right to the best we can. I don't know that we're going to get a lot more information than we already have, so now's the time that we should try to get it right. Josh, I'm a little confused. I'm not sure in the current proposal where wake surfing is allowed along the entire stretch from to the falls. Could you clarify for my sake what areas would be open to wake surfing?
Sure, Member Withey. So under the current proposal, wake surfing is restricted from the falls to the Waverly Marina. And I guess I'll share my screen again because I think that would help. Here are the falls. The Waverly Marina is this right here. So this whole stretch where wake surfing would be restricted. And that stretch, it's the narrowest stretch between really the Newburgh Pole and the mouth with or including the Newburgh Pole and the mouth of the Columbia. So through here, under the current proposal.
Slow down. It keeps going in and out. Kind of, it's real disjointed. So if you can slow it down just a little bit and show us again, please.
I will go as slow as I
also,
possibly.
Josh, for clarity, when you say restricted, what do you mean? You mean disallowed?
I do. When I say restricted, I mean completely disallowed. So the current proposal in this stretch from the bottom, I'm sorry, hoping this is going from here, the falls. Here you have Milwaukee, Lake Oswego, up to the South Reach of Portland. So right here, wake surfing would be completely restricted. So not allowed, disallowed. As well as there would be the buffer zones for wakeboarding and water skiing, but that could still happen here so long as it happened the appropriate distances from docks. And in our analysis, there's certainly plenty of room through here where water skiing and wakeboarding, the pool of inflatables could happen.
Go ahead. Sorry, Josh.
From the southern tip of Waverly Marina, which is right here, to the Hawthorne Bridge up here, the current proposal would have this be a pass-through zone. So that would restrict wake surfing, but that would also restrict all towed water sports, so water skiing, pool of inflatables as well. Now, currently that proposal is for May 1st to September 30th. So during the off-boating season, this area would be available for all towed water sports, including wake surfing. Now, that being said, this is not a very common activity in this stretch during the off months, but the current proposal would allow it. From this point, this is the Hawthorne Bridge, the whole way to the mouth. There would be no restrictions, no further restrictions as part of this rulemaking. So wake surfing, pool of inflatables, everything would not be regulated whatsoever from this stretch downstream to the mouth. Member Withy, does that answer your question?
Can't hear you, Craig. You need to take yourself off mute.
Hey, thanks. So for clarity, we have indeed restricted wake surfing for the entire reach that's under consideration.
That is correct.
Now, if we had opened up the area above Waverly to Hawthorne Bridge for a time period where wake surfers could use it, and there wouldn't be any kayakers on the water, that's not workable to the board. Is that correct? I'm looking for other members to respond.
Well, really, what we passed before, if you look back at the graphic on the local
Right.
boating regulations, the pass-through zone that
Right.
Josh gave us shows what was already passed for a pass-through zone,
Yeah.
and then the additional proposed pass-through zone. So currently, what we are looking at in front of us is the green part to be added to the pink part there.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. But some of the comments, some of the complaints is that we've shown a bias to wake surfers, and we blocked them out of the area. We told them they can go downstream from Hawthorne Bridge, and they keep complaining that that's a very undesirable area. There's too much wind. So they really feel that we've had a bias against them. And I'm trying to see if there's an opportunity to give them a portion of the area between Waverly and Hawthorne Bridge to use when other people aren't using it, or, you know, through some times where they're not causing conflicts with the paddlers. And I'm just wondering if we can come up with some solution there. Now, I know that's somewhat what Vince is seeking. So I'm just throwing it out there.
Vince?
Yeah, one of my concerns with Waverly to the Falls is, and when I took the tour with Nate, there were still quite a few wakeboard boats, you know, all up and down that whole stretch. And so many families enjoy that area that they can recreate in. And that was, you know, a lot of the comments, you know, some of the comments that we got was that's, you know, that's their area and their home values. I mean, that's why they purchased those homes. And so we're really, you know, when we start doing these rules, you're really affecting these people's homes. And yeah, I get it. There's opposition homes too that don't want them on there, but you've also, so you've got to be really careful. And that's a tough balance to just all of a sudden, you know, these people put their life savings in this home to live on the river and wake surf and wakeboard and tow their kids on tubes. And then all of a sudden you're just shutting most of that down. I'm not saying all of it because, you know, obviously, but we got to be really careful when we start making rules that are limiting these people's and those homes. We don't live in those homes. So, you know, it doesn't affect me at all, but it affects them. And that's what I want to really caution when we make these rules.
But I believe in that case, the 300-foot rule pretty much blocks them out because the river's not wide enough. Is that correct, Josh?
Remember, if you applied the 300-foot rule in that stretch, as is what's in place in the Newburgh Pool, then yes, that almost completely outside of a couple quarter-mile areas that it really wouldn't be feasible. Yes, that eliminates, that activity in that stretch. And actually, if you look at the laws that are currently in place for responsibility of one's wake, that whole stretch is probably functionally very restrictive to wake surfing already. I'm very aware that activity happens there quite a bit. But given the 400 to 500 foot river widths there, and just the propensity of docks, wake surfing is arguably restricted throughout most, if not all, of the Waverly to the Falls stretch already. And you see in some of the, especially some of the comments that have come in support of the current proposal, they point that out, that this is actually just being consistent. The current proposal is being consistent with rules that are already in place.
So
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to touch something that we seem to forget is when ORSPA did the wake study on the Upper Willamette, and if we look at the wake energy of these boats, at 200 feet, basically how the wake dissipates, a fishing boat at 100 feet had the same wake energy as a wake surf boat. So are we going to restrict them too? We kind of forget that wake study, that the farther away, so 200 to 250 feet, center line of that river, that by the time the wake hits that dock, it has decreased quite a bit, and that has been proven in quite a few studies that I've been educated on, and by past speakers when we did work studies. So again, we kind of forget that we put some time into that we worked together with Active Water Sports and brought some boats to the table and say, hey, let's see what this really does. And so, yeah, we came up with the 300 foot just to try to compromise upriver, but it doesn't necessarily mean that when these boats are center or as far away from the docks that wave energy is going to damage. We don't have any proof of that, and yet we're still making rules about it. I just wanted to point that out, that we kind of forget that wake study that was done.
Okay, additional questions for Josh or comments? So Josh, can you tell me in mileage, how far would a person who lived up near the Elk Rock area have to travel to be able to wake surf?
Chair, give me about 15 seconds and I can give you pretty much an exact, I'm just bringing up my map with river miles. So if you started at around Elk Rock, which is exactly river mile 19, if that was your starting point to get to a place where wake surfing would be allowed under the current proposal, you would get to roughly river mile 13. So a distance of approximately 6 miles, to answer your question.
And Vince, how long does it take to travel that distance in a wakeboarding boat that is not weighted?
I would say, 6 miles?
Yes.
Probably 10, 15 minutes at the most.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So did you have another comment there, Vince? Craig.
I'm going to wait for just a bit. So go ahead, Craig.
I'd like to ask Laura a question. Laura, would you see an opportunity for wake surfing in and around Ross Island to alleviate some of the concerns that they have about being blocked out of the area?
I mean, some of that area is maybe conducive part of the year, but during the summertime low water, the really wide section, I mean, part of where the first part of the no wake zone that was adopted, 12 years ago, it's narrow, it's curvy, the section that we adopted in October, part of the year might be suitable, but during low water periods, there's a huge sandbar that develops that renders almost half of that waterway, even for paddle sports, almost unusable because you can't stick your paddle in the water, you stick your paddle in the mud. I don't know, and there's a lot of teaching organizations, both again, small businesses that teach paddle sports, that lead nature tours of Ross Island, that are really looking forward to having that area as a safe place to do their businesses. The lagoon is another story. But the lagoon, at least during the summer, was still active Monday through Friday with barges and tugboats and stuff. And there is, again, some sensitive